News is the home of country bar songs across America.
On Sirius XM.
Hello and welcome to Somewhere in America. I am driving the brand new X3M and I'm on my way to the very picturesque Monticello Race Circuit in New York State to drive the X4M, which is this car's twin. And I'm very excited because this is the first ever X3 and X4M that BMW have ever made. But let's start with this X3M. Now, of course, you're thinking to yourself, well, I can really just buy an X3 and ask BMW to stick an M badge on it. So what is the point of the X3M? Well, I have spent a lot of time with some very smart German engineers, and they have explained the difference to me. So for the X3M, there are many bespoke elements to this car, particularly when it comes to the suspension system. So the dampers are bespoke, the links in the suspension are bespoke, the entire steering system is bespoke to this car. There is bespoke chassis strengthening and there are bespoke strut braces all over the car which help make it a lot stiffer than your run-of-the-mill X3. And what's also really interesting is many of the components of the M5 are carried over into this car. So the internals of the 8-speed gearbox, those are from the M5, the prop shaft is from the M5, the front diff, the internals of the rear active M diff, those are from the M5 as well. And obviously they've had to put it all in different housings so it can fit into the chassis. And we're about to find out, of course, when we thrash this around a track, what it can really do. But the reality is, how much time is an X3M or an X4M owner really going to spend on a racetrack? I'm guessing it's somewhere between 0 and maybe 0.5% of their lives. And so this car has to work out here in the real world. And the road surface I'm on right now is pretty smooth, but we've been over some pretty rough stuff today. And I think it's fine. It's okay. Sure, there's a bit more harshness coming through the suspension, a little bit more vibration than you'd get in a garden variety X3. But to be honest with you, I don't think South Africans care because this is the fastest X3 you can buy. It has the engine from the upcoming M3, and that's pretty much that. Arriving at the Monticello Raceway, we were greeted by a large lounge area featuring a variety of snacks. But more importantly, in the middle of the room was a freestanding engine, the brand new motor we'd just driven in the X3M and we're about to experience around the track. It's such a rare opportunity to see the engine presented like this. So I thought I'd take the opportunity and give you an overview of this brand new 3-litre twin turbocharged motor. This over here is the indirect intercooler. Now normally an intercooler would be shoved towards the front of the engine bay and it would essentially be a radiator. This is actually fed coolant from 2 radiators set very low in the air dams, and the charged air comes from across the engine from the 2 turbochargers. Now the advantage of this is that the distance from the turbocharger to the intercooler is much shorter. So air comes through here at about 180 degrees Celsius and then gets cooled down at the intercooler and sent into the intake manifold. So let's have a quick look at where the turbochargers are hiding. There's one over there and there's one over there. And then air runs, of course, through the turbochargers and out through the exhaust manifold. There's 2 pipes all the way to the back of the car where they meet the rear muffler. But there's actually 2 bypass valves to bypass that rear muffler. And that makes sure that this engine sounds the best that it possibly can. So I'm going to try present to camera the whole time while I'm out on the Monticello Raceway, but I can't turn the walkies off because the pace car driver needs to talk to me. If I'm in the middle of a sentence and you hear the walkie, it's not my fault. Oh, wrong gear. Second, boom, here we go, 375 kilowatts in this competition pack, 600 Newton meters of torque. Third, flat foot. The engine will redline at 7,200 RPM. Shift at the red line. Big red lights in front of me in my heads-up display. Wow, that is good grip out of that corner. And the really interesting thing about this X-Drive system is that it's actually 100% rear bias until the system feels that the front wheels need to get involved. And then obviously you can turn down the DSC and even completely switch it off. So in track mode like this, when we're in MDM and the DSC is limited, the front wheel intervention is obviously delayed, comes in a lot later. So you are really dealing with what is essentially a rear-wheel drive car here, which has a all-wheel drive safety system, I suppose, is a good way of thinking about it. A lot of work has gone into making this X4M and the X3M feel very different and behave very differently to a normal X3 or X4. Of course, the biggest difference is this completely new engine, and you might have heard or you might suspect that this engine is the next M3 and M4 engine, and I asked the engineers directly about that, and the powertrain expert said to me, well, you know, we spent a lot of money on this engine, and I don't think the X3 is the only place you'll see it, with a big smile on his face. So, but funnily enough, this car is actually a little bit heavier than a standard X3 because of all the extra chassis strengthening, because of the bigger engine, and because of the diff as well. So there's a little bit of a weight penalty here, but of course you've got all this power and all this torque to make up for it. Oh, that gear change. I can just hammer it out. Oh, that's good. Punch in the back. This is a great circuit. So much elevation change. Lots of variety of corners, this Monticello Raceway. I am thoroughly enjoying myself. So you've got two M modes in here, or M buttons rather, little red buttons on the steering wheel. Those M buttons allow you to control and personally set 6 variables: engine, transmission, DSC, VSC, steering feel. Throttle response is virtually instantaneous once you've got a little bit of momentum going, but with all of your torque coming in at 2,600 RPM, it's really not that much of a momentum car. I mean, you can get it a bit wrong into the corner, just get hammer on the throttle and let the all-wheel drive system sort of sort out your life, really. Oh, I completely screwed up that corner. And if the all-wheel drive system detects a lot of understeer, it'll actually dial back the power from the front end and send a bit more of it to the rear to dial out that understeer. So obviously driving dynamics are a big part of this brand, and I think they've done enough here to make this feel like an M car. Obviously it's quite heavy. It's pretty close to 2 tons, this car. 1,970 kgs dry weight, which actually makes it a little bit heavier than its direct competitor, the Mercedes-Benz GLC 63, which has an extra 100 Newton meters, but the same amount of power as this car. So 0 to 100 in here in this competition, 4.1, 4.2 for the non-competition, whereas the Merc does it in 3.8. So it just seems to be able to convert its power and its torque. It's probably that torque figure actually, which gives it a little bit of an advantage off the line. Oh, brakes are good. All new brakes on this car as well, and they're lighter and larger than the brakes you'd get in a normal X3. Oh, I really love it when manufacturers give us a chance to absolutely hammer their cars. These are road cars at the end of the day, and life on track is tough, man. These cars take an absolute beating out here. Feels very settled, this car. God, this is a good racetrack. Please, can we just import this entire racetrack to South Africa? Oh, this corner is really, really tricky. It's completely off camber. And talking about camber, they've actually increased the camber in the front wheels here for better front end grip. Oh, those gear shifts are good. And I learned quite an interesting thing today. You know, a lot of performance cars manufacturers are moving away from double clutch gearboxes. You remember BMW had that MDCT box, the 7-speed. And funnily enough, in certain situations, with certain requests of the gearbox, for instance, if you want to go from 5 to 3rd, a single clutch gearbox is actually faster than a double clutch gearbox. And the other big benefit, of course, is fuel consumption, which manufacturers these days have to be very, very sensitive to. So, yeah, the dual clutch box is pretty much a thing of the past. This is a really interesting car. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I mean, if you want a performance car, ultimately an SUV is not what you want, right? It's taller and heavier than a sedan. It always is going to be. There's nothing you can do about that. That's just physics. But, of course, there is that status symbol or that presence on the road which an SUV gives you, which maybe is missing from a sedan. And of course, back home in South Africa, we love SUVs for that. SUVs pretty much outsell their sedan equivalents back home. This car ticks a lot of boxes in terms of desire, but does it tick all the boxes in terms of performance? And BMW don't do M cars lightly. They really do put a lot of extra engineering to make this car different from the car that it's based on. And I respect that. And I think after hammering it out here, there is a big difference. I have driven the normal X4, and this is a different experience. And a lot of that is down to this engine. It's a real peach of an engine, very free revving, very linear in its response. You pretty much hard pressed to work out that it's actually turbocharged, which is great. And you know, linear power delivery, very important aspect to this brand as well, something they're really proud of. I think based on the experience I've just had, I'm pretty happy calling this a performance car. Yeah.
All right, then just activate B for park.
Ooh, these brakes sound terrible.
Hello, welcome to the end of the video. There is so much cool stuff to do here. You can click on all these things and it works on your phone. Just